What's up, BritLit students? Okay, let's get this lesson started. Hey, don't forget today to be good to your sub. In fact, let's make it be good to your sub day. Hey, better yet, let's make it be good to your substitute week. So right now, I want everybody to turn to your sub and give them a big smile. Great. All right. So keep up your great attitude and treat your sub really well. I'm sure you will because they're just one of your other teachers who you dearly love. Anyways, okay, let's get this lesson started. In your journals, answer the question with at least 2 complete sentences. What are the warnings that you predict you will get from reading 1984? Pause the video here, take just a couple of minutes to answer this question, and as soon as you're done, come back and hit play on the video. Go. All right, welcome back, students. Here we go. What were some of the warnings that you were kind of predicting at this point you're going to receive from 1984? Well, we're going to start reading the book, and we'll see if you are right. All right. Okay, our big idea for this lesson today is many literary works are written to warn, predict, and ultimately motivate societies to consider worldview implications. In other words, ideas have consequences. Have you ever heard that saying? I honestly don't know who it's attributed to for coming up with that saying first, but it is a well-known statement now that probably is attributed to multiple intelligent people from history, but it is that ideas have consequences. And so a lot of literature that has been written throughout history, and especially during the time period that Orwell wrote, 1984, there were a lot of novels, stories, plays written and told and acted that were essentially written to warn and predict and to motivate societies to consider worldview implications. Well, it's no different today. In fact, there are movies that are made today whose directors and authors and writers are completely on board with that, and they are doing it for the same motivation. They want people to consider worldview implications. I think you could easily make the connection between this book, this novel we're about to get into, 1984, and modern movies like Hunger Games, for example. The worldview implications or the implications, the consequences that could potentially happen if we allowed certain worldviews to completely go to their logical conclusions, right? All right, so that's our big idea. I hope you can connect that with our book. The standard that we're working on is relate literary works and authors to major themes and issues of their era. So let's check out what was going on and what motivated Orwell to write this book in the first place. The essential questions we're looking at today: what desired change or impact is the author of a dystopian novel going for? What are the warnings that you predict you'll get from 1984? And what are some of the key external motivators that caused Orwell to write 1984 in the first place? Today, what you're going to be able to do before the next class is students will be able to interview George Orwell by researching the answers to the questions, why did you write 1984? And why do you believe your novel became so iconic? Now, you're going to get a chance to come up with your own interview questions, and you'll see how we're going to do that in a minute. But then you'll need to answer one of these 2 questions here on your objective. Okay, the first learning activity that we are going to dive into today is question formulation technique. Hopefully, most of you will remember this from lessons in previous units earlier this year. Now, notice up in the corner in red font there, I let you know that you can partner with your seating buddy if you like. You're welcome to do this as an individual. If you do not want to partner with anyone, go right ahead. Keep your head down, your earphones in, and do this all on your own. If you'd like to partner with the person sitting next to you, please feel free to do that. However, I'd like there not to be any groups larger than 2. There might need to be 1 or maybe even 2 groups of 3, depending on the number of students that showed up for this Monday. But there shouldn't be any more than 1 or 2 groups at the most that have 3. Otherwise, please just partner up or work as an individual? Okay, let me go over what we're going to do. We are going to first ask as many questions about the images that you'll see as possible. Then write these questions down. You can write them down anywhere. You can write them in your journal, or you can go grab a scratch piece of paper and write them down on a scratch piece of paper. Whatever works best for you and your partner is fine. Don't forget, we're not stopping at this point to judge or answer or critique any of the questions. If one of the questions that you think of or that your partner thinks of is phrased as a statement, no problem. Just convert it into a question and write it down. Remember, take the time, that 5 quick minutes, to write down as many questions as you possibly can think of that are generated from your viewing of the images that you'll see in a minute. Then you're going to have a few minutes to categorize your questions. O for open-ended questions, C for closed-ended questions. And then also I'd like you this time to put a CT for critical thinking question next to any question that's particularly strong. It's a question that gets you really thinking and allows you probably to go into a deeper level of thinking. It's probably a question that leads to a lot more questions, one of those kind of questions. Then you're going to prioritize your questions by choosing your 3 most important questions and list them in order of importance. So that is the question formulation technique, and we're going to go ahead and do that here. So let's get started. You've got 5 minutes, and please be true to the clock for yourself so we can keep this lesson moving. But I realize that not every group might be getting done at the exact same time. No problem. But you and your partner, please take the next 5 minutes to ask as many questions about the images as possible, and then write these questions down. So you can go ahead and begin. Pause the tape here and take your 5 minutes. Go. Okay, welcome back. How many questions were you and your partner able to come up with? I hope you were able to come up with at least a half a dozen, maybe even a dozen questions that are spawned from looking at these different images. All right, now we're going to move on to the next phase of the question formulation technique. Categorize your questions, O for open-ended questions, C for closed-ended questions, and don't forget, put a CT for critical thinking next to any question that just drives you to a deeper level of inquiry and allows you to think that you're probably going to be able to go really deep with this topic or this idea or this concept from that question. All right, go ahead and pause the tape here and then categorize your questions. Okay, welcome back. Let's go on to the third phase of question formulation technique. Now that you've asked as many questions as you can based on those images, and now that you've categorized them, go ahead and prioritize your questions. Now, here's the trick for today. Your priority questions might look different than your partner, or if you're one of the few groups that's doing this in a group of 3. You are welcome to have different priority questions than your partner. That is no problem. So just take a couple of minutes, go through the questions again, look at their category, and decide for you which questions are priority questions, and then list them 1, 2, and 3. Now remember, you can do this as an individual. Even if you're partnered up right now, you might have a different priority question than your partner. So take just a minute to do this. Pause the tape here, take 1 minute, go. Okay, welcome back. Now that you have those 3 priority questions, here is what we're going to do with them. You're going to move into learning activity 2, and this is what you'll do with the rest of class today. You're going to interview George Orwell. That's right. Let's pretend we have George Orwell available to us as a guest speaker, and let's interview him and find out as much as we can about 1984, the book that is, not necessarily the year. I was in the 2nd grade in 1984, and that was the year I broke my wrist, if I remember right. But anyways, not the actual year, but the novel by George Orwell, 1984. Let's find out as much as we can before diving into the novel. So you will answer 1 of the questions from our objective and 2 of your priority questions. in an effort to interview George Orwell about his literary work, 1984. So keep in mind, one question from our objective and two of your priority questions you need to have answered in paragraph form for a total of 3 questions, 3 interview questions, asked and answered. Now, you'll have a follow-up question to each of your interview questions, and you'll see that format in just a second. If your priority questions at this point don't quite sound like interview questions, take just a minute to tweak them a little bit. Do something to them that would turn them into a little bit more of an interview question. And then notice here that 1 paragraph for each answer. So not just a quick little sentence, but at least a paragraph for each answer, just like you'd hear in an interview if you really were interviewing George Orwell. And then follow the format of the document that I've provided. And I'll show you that here. So here is your assignment on Google Classroom. Each of you has this document here. Sorry. This document here. I thought I already had it up. I did not. Here it is. Each of you has this document here. Notice that you will list a question. This first question will be the one objective question that you choose to answer. Either, why did you write 1984? Or, why do you believe your novel became so iconic? You will choose one of those questions. You will cut and paste the question here. And notice the format I want you to follow. You will answer the question according to how you believe Orwell would have answered it if he were here with us. That's why I call it Orwell's speculative response based on your research. So you will use the articles that I've provided for you for the objective question, and you will go find your own articles for your priority questions. Now, some of your priority questions may be answered in the articles that I've provided for you, and that is okay. There is no minimum or maximum amount of resources that you need to use. You simply need to find accurate answers. And of course, I understand you're going to be using some speculation here to answer these questions, and that's okay. Orwell's speculative response based on your research. Then you need to come up with a follow-up question. What would the interviewer ask in follow-up to Orwell's original response? Write out that follow-up question and then have Orwell answer that follow-up question. Each of these should be at least 1 paragraph. Notice then you'll move on to your first priority question, which is one of the questions you came up with today. And then the second priority question, another question that you came up with today, for a total of 3 questions answered. There's simple instructions here to follow if you get confused at all. Okay, let me show you here. Notice the articles that I linked in for you to access. Again, a lot of your questions should probably be answered in those articles, but you are free to search the internet for more information, more sources. All right. Okay, so you will go ahead and spend the rest of class completing this assignment. Any part of this assignment you don't get done in class, you will complete as homework. Make sure this assignment is completed before our next class, okay? Now, let me give you a quick little example of what I do and what I don't want. You've seen this before from our last unit. Question, when did you first have the idea to write 1984? By the way, I completely made up all this information. I have no idea if any of this is true. However, what is true is it shows you an example of a type of response that I don't want and a type of response I do want. So the first response in red, the one I don't want to see. When did you first have the idea to write 1984? I was listening to a news report about the developing totalitarian states. Okay, fine, maybe that is, but the article you find the answer to this question in will probably give you a little more detail that you can at least speculate on and dive into. So a response should sound more like this. When did you first have the idea to write 1984? I doubt I was the first with the idea. There were many of us talking about the potential long-term implications to these developing totalitarian states. It's not that the world hadn't seen these types of leaders and their efforts to enact their version of socialism on society before, but this new brand of social order and ideology seemed to breed a peculiar version of society that could lead to so many contradictions. One evening, I was listening to a news report that exposed a severe double standard of one of the leaders of Russia. It was then that I thought about telling a story that exposed all the potential consequences of allowing these types of governments to survive. That would be a junior and senior level response to the question. And I expect to see something more like that on your documents, okay? All right, moving along. So, quick reminder before you click out of the video and get to your activity. There will be reading accountability quizzes and a big unit test for 1984. So please, please, please keep up with your reading. I just heard from a teacher the other day that there were some students, some seniors, that were bragging that they've never had to read one single book in their literature classes and they've been able to pass them just fine. So I don't know exactly if she was talking about current seniors. She simply said, I've heard in the past that seniors have said that they haven't had to read a single book and still pass. You know what? Maybe you're someone who can do that. And maybe you pride yourself in doing that. But the funny thing is somebody's paying for this education. If you're on scholarship at Logos, well, Logos is paying for your education. And that money comes from a lot of kind-hearted people who care about your future. If you're a student who's not on scholarship, then your mom and dad are likely the ones, or maybe a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt, a guardian who cares about you is paying for your education. And when you pride yourself in being able to do something like totally avoid reading a book and still pass the class or do well in the tests and quizzes anyways, all you're doing is flushing their money down the toilet. Because really, although you get the A or the B, that's all you get is an A or a B. And really, in the grand scheme of things, who cares about the letter? What matters is the learning that you do. And although some of this learning might be review, I have news for you. Most of the learning you'll do in the future will be review. You constantly go over key concepts and ideas and philosophies and themes that life keeps throwing your way. I mean, we learn by constant review and continuing to go over big picture things. And so please don't flush your education down. Don't flush your parents' money down the toilet or Logos's money down the toilet by trying to make your goal to read as few of pages in these books as you can and still get an A in the class. That's a pretty immature attitude from someone who is definitely not ready to move on to university. So I'm doubting that that's any of you seniors this year. But anyways, this teacher reminded me of that the other day. And so I wanted to just be sure that that's not you. So hopefully my reading accountability quizzes and our unit test are enough that they keep you motivated to want to read the book. All right, notice what your homework is. Your homework, other than finishing this interview with Orwell if you need more time, is to read pages 1 to 28 and observe the answers to questions to consider. And here are your questions to consider while you're reading this first chapter in 1984. What are the images used to set the tone of the book? What is the tone that these images set? And what is the key distinction for Winston, our protagonist, in the first few characters he describes? What is the key distinction for Winston in the first few characters he describes in the book? Let's see if you can observe the answers. You don't need to write them down. I want you to observe the answers to these questions and just be ready to discuss them at the beginning of our next class. Okay, you are welcome to stop the video here. I'm just going to show you our calendar so that you kind of know where we're at while I say these closing remarks. You're welcome to stop the video here and go ahead and spend the rest of your class interviewing George Orwell. All right, I'll talk to you soon.